Welcome to another War Game Review with theplayersaid.com. I'm Grant.
And I'm Alexander.
This evening we played a game from, and we're in 2019, but
this
we
is
played...
the first War Game Review of 2019.
It is, which is really sad because today's the 18th.
and we're playing a game from 2018.
Yeah, which is horrendous, I'm sorry. But so we played a game from 2018 that was released, I believe it was in around March or April of 2018. This is Battle Hymn Volume 1, Gettysburg and Pea Ridge. It's by Eric Lee Smith. It's from Compass Games. It is a fantastically produced, with beautiful components, both the counters and the map.
And the artwork.
And the artwork, yep. That's a very famous painting. In fact, on the U.S. Civil War.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the U.S. Civil War from GMT has that.
Is it the same one?
They blew it up differently. It's a very famous picture. Very famous picture. But this game covers the Battle of Gettysburg, which is a decisive Union victory and really the turning point in the American Civil War. So,
because Pea Ridge is a separate game.
This
is two games in one box.
Pea Ridge is the Western Front. It's the Trans-Mississippi or Mississippi area in Missouri. This is obviously in Gettysburg. So, but it's a very different Civil War game. I think there's a lot of neat concepts in this one. What was the game we kept saying to ourselves, this felt like it?
Which...
We're not sure it totally did. It's totally different.
Yeah, it's so some of the feelings that I got from this game, which again, like you said, beautiful components.
Yep. Which that game was beautiful too.
Yeah, it felt somewhat, or it had some reminiscence of At Any Cost, which is Met's 1870 from GMT. Mm-hmm. And it's because this is a game of trying to keep your battle lines together. Mm-hmm. It's chip pull activation for different formations.
And there are a lot of formations.
Yes, and it's a game of attrition as well. Mm-hmm. You move in, it's bloody as hell, you move out, you regroup, you go again. That's a lot of what this is. Terrain is really important.
Direly important.
This game, however, the artillery, not as good.
Terrible.
Obviously, there's like a pretty significant difference in the artillery they were using in that game. Mm-hmm. Few years later, at least.
Yeah.
But in that game, this one, the artillery is kind of like almost like pea shooters.
Well, anytime it's farther away than 3 hexes, it was virtually impossible to hit.
But the game felt similar and would make an excellent solitaire game because you pull a chit. This is the formation that moves, and that's all they do is they move.
Yeah.
And when they move, might set up some things for combat later. Mm-hmm. But each turn, you pull all the chits and move everyone. But there's only 2 kind of combat rounds. Chits. One of them's for the Union. Mm-hmm. One of them's for the CSA. And whichever player has the initiative, they keep theirs out of that cup. They don't draw it. They get to choose when it happens.
But it has to be called before a chit is drawn.
Before the next chip pull, you get to say, bang, we're doing combat.
And I really liked that part. I thought that was excellent.
Whereas the other one, it's random. So, if you're not the initiative player, you're like,
right,
we're fighting whatever.
Well, and we said one combat. I think if you do some of the bigger scenarios, I'm sure there's multiple combat chits in there. I don't know that for sure.
I don't think there is.
You don't think there is?
I don't think so, no.
Because I thought there were several that were... Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't think so.
They give you more move turns.
Yes, there's a lot of different chits.
Okay, well,
some of it might be for Pea Ridge as well.
Completely wrong.
But yeah, it's fascinating in that way because only one player can be sure when they're going to initiate combat.
Right.
And the other player,
it's just...
I'll attack when it gets pulled.
And the reality is sometimes, like in many chit pull games, if you're not engaged in enough spots and you draw that combat chit,
it might be bad.
You might only get to shoot 1 or 2 units that are in contact with anybody. So that adds some real uncertainty to it.
And there's an option when you pull your chit and you're the attacker in that instance. You can
retreat from combat. So you don't have to.
If you're in a bad spot, you can pull back, but then then you pull back for the turn. You don't get to do an attack for the rest of the turn.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
The next attack's going to be on the opponent's terms. So there's some real kind of uncertainty, a little bit of fog of war in that way.
Yeah,
you might be forced,
definitely.
You might be forced into like staying, where you might. I wish I could have been aggressive, which can turn battles at certain points as well.
Well, and playing the CSA, I had the initiative. I did enjoy that part of it because there were a couple times where I needed certain things to happen. And I said to myself, okay, I could go ahead and preempt now and attack and maybe have a decent attack. But man, if I could only pull Hood's division, I could move.
You risk that shit?
Yeah, so there really comes some decision points where you're like, do I risk? And I like that uncertainty, and I also like that strategizing of the turn order. I think that's a great element, and whoever has the initiative gets to do that. And I like that.
I don't know if a lot of games within a chip pull don't have an initiative because you do whatever it says.
You
basically.
Pull it and
And this one was fascinating because it had that initiative plan, and that's a really important choice.
Absolutely,
to have,
very important,
and for the opponent not to have.
Yeah,
and I think that's a really cool way of doing that. And it kind of fits in with the game, the engine, the mechanics that it's trying to do as well.
Yeah. So the other thing I would say about this game, not talking about the combat system, the movement, although I believe the maneuvering part of this game is very, very key. And I think early on, I did some boo-boos with my Hood's division kind of on the left flank of the Union. I think I could have done a couple of different things that would have put more pressure on Round Top and Little Round Top, which are objective points in the scenario we played. Our scenario was called the Best 3 Days.
Best 3 hours.
The Best 3 Hours, sorry. Yeah. And that's based on a quote by one of the generals that the fighting on the second day of the battle was the best 3 hours of any combat ever, is what he said. But, that the terrain, I think, is a huge part of this game.
Yes.
Right? It is. And we talked about this. The old maxim from Sun Tzu is, what do you do when someone has the high ground? You never attack. Unless you have the advantage, you don't attack. And I think the South, Lee, made that almost a hubris decision that we're better, we're going to take it to the Union. When they should have marched away and chosen a different battlefield. But I thought the terrain was fantastic. It's a really neat terrain system because movement is very different than normal. An open hex might be one
on a road
movement point. Yeah. Well, but in a normal game, an open hex may be one. In this game, it was two. And we were talking about, they had higher movements, but you got to take that into account too. I felt like Eric did a great job of boiling that down, making sure it's almost as if the terrain played a major role in the game. It was like it was a character.
Yes.
It was like it was a character of its own, because the reality is the way the lines are set up, the CSA's got to be aggressive. You got to attack. Well, guess what happens? You end up retreating because the system. We'll talk a little bit about that combat system. And then the Union just gets to move right up on all that high ground and get into the woods and the forests. And it's like, it's going to be really tough to hit you now.
Yes.
So I like that element of it. I think there is some very importance put on maneuvering. And like I said, I think at the beginning, I boogered that up a little bit. You also talked about your reinforcement schedule. Once probably the second round of reinforcements come on.
Yeah.
If I haven't taken certain points, it's very, very difficult to even hope to go against that.
Towards the end of the second day, Fifth Corps kind of comes in with some fresh reinforcements, and my guys at the front lines were starting to get
we were beat up.
I was like, that's bad. But I ended up with 3 or 6 guys in the last 2 turns coming in, filling up those lines fresh. You filled this
huge difference. You built this whole line again, and it's like, I can't really do anything about that.
Because the game really, it's about keeping your battle lines so you can have good combat, or at least not bad combat against you, and keeping those fresh, because it's a game of attrition. You track your losses, you track your demoralized troops, and if you can get fresh guys in there, it's a huge advantage.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I really liked about the game, and what did they call that? They used a word, flashing fire. What did they?
The approach fire.
Well, but there was a word that they used that you want to spread the fire out. So the example they showed was you never want to move one of your units into contact with two enemy units. It was in there, and we'll show you a little bit on the board, but you don't want to make it such that two different units can fire only on your one guy.
Yeah.
You want to have a continual line up there to defray or spread out that fire so it can't be as concentrated.
Because if one guy can shoot at two adjacent, he has to. He has to split them.
You split it evenly, and if you have an odd number, you get to choose where that final one goes.
Or you can do it randomly.
Or you can do it. I don't know why you wouldn't want to choose it. That's more strategic. Yeah.
But it's really, I couldn't find the word.
Keep talking.
But it was so cool because it was that mechanic that forced you to keep good battle lines. And a lot of games do it differently. Some of them are like, you have to be next to each other and you make it like a cohesion check, or, there's modifiers here and there. This one, it's like, if you move up one guy, he will get slaughtered because you have three guys attacking him. But if you move up three guys on their three guys, it's kind of an even odds. Mm-hmm. And if you can start getting more guys and start flanking, their attacks become weaker because they got to split them, and yours get stronger as you get to gang up on them.
Yeah.
And then you get into, there's zones of control in this one, and if you can actually outflank and surround someone, you start getting more bonuses. More modifiers.
We never experienced that. I don't think we ever really got anybody getting extra bonuses from zones of control, having multiple zones of control in there.
But yeah, it's a fantastic looking game.
Yeah.
I love the style of these maps, and Pea Ridge is different from this. This is you kind of see this as kind of a beigey light gray, and you get Pea Ridge as like a vibrant green.
Yeah, it's more green because it has more woods and more forests.
But it's also just the whole map is just
green,
and it's just cool. They're different style, but it really looks like it's a wargame map, but it looks like it's a kind of an older. Document. I think it looks great, and a game that looks good it's always a plus to me.
So the combat system, there's a couple of different elements. So when you approach and come into contact with the enemy, you put a move token. It's an engagement token.
It's a little it's an approach fire
token, and what it tells you is that you're moving. The enemy can fire on you, but the moving that you're doing causes him to be not very good at hitting you. But that can be very devastating. Many times you would roll a couple of ones and it'd be like, shoot, I was trying to move into position, getting hit, and the way the hit works, if you save, you just become demoralized, but if you don't save, it's a loss, and then a demoralization, then you have to retreat.
Yeah.
So it can be very, very devastating when you're trying to move up those lines and push the advantage. If you don't defray that approach fire, man, you're gonna get walloped.
Yes.
And it just makes it so you can never generate enough momentum to move that line forward. And that's where the terrain comes in.
Yeah.
Many a time I was rolling needing a 2 to hit. You were needing 4s or less because you were firing from
down a hill,
from a hilltop, and
if you're in the open,
attacking
in the open in this,
you don't want to. But the way it's set up, the CSA really is in the open more often than they are in cover. But it's a very interesting combat. It can continue beyond a single round if nobody has to retreat and they're still engaged. You go to a second round. If you do eliminate, shatter, or force to retreat when you're attacking, you can move up. That's very key for the CSA to hopefully get some of that, get some units out of the way so they can move up. I did well on that the first round, but I probably should have split my forces a little bit. 12 was overkill, for sure. But, a lot of neat elements in that combat system, and I didn't feel like it was that clunky. The clunkier part was the counters.
Well, yeah. So I love a game that has stacking limit of 1.
Yeah, and that's what this is. 1.
It's great. But as you start to lose strength points, you put counters under there to denote that. And as guys get demoralized, it's more and more counters. So you do end up with some stacks there. And then you putting your hit markers on them and your move markers.
Yep.
So some of the stacks
Five,
are a
six
little bit of a
stack, yeah.
mess, and it's a game of battle lines, so get your tweezers out.
Well, and my hands at least, I just am not as nimble as I need to be when dealing with counters. But I like the combat system. That you inflict hits, and then each of those hits you have to do a morale check.
And do those hits become physical losses where guys died, or is it just
demoralizations?
They were demoralized and they're running away?
Which is bad as well. They're both bad.
Yeah. One
will score more victory points than another.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get guys back. You can only get guys back in night turns.
Which is like, there's 11 day turns and then 2 night turns.
2 night turns, yeah.
Guys who can survive 11 day turns,
yeah.
You have an option to be able to rally them, and you might be able to remove the demoralized.
Right.
So it's not going to be a lot of guys that do that successfully. This is a very, very bloody game.
Yep. One thing we talked about, and we were kind of just talking about it, I know we have a disagreement about it, but that approach fire. The scale of this game is 1 hex is 300 yards, right? So 1 hex is 300 yards, 3 football fields. When you retreat because of losses and demoralization, you have to retreat 2 hexes. So that's 600 yards, 6 football fields. My opinion, I thought that was probably a little too much to retreat. But I understand the game was set up that way. Why did you disagree with me on that? Why don't you just agree with me on everything,
I disagree with you on that. Not from like a realistic standpoint, but from a game effect system standpoint. Yeah. It's about, because the game, what it basically works where you've got your lines coming together and smashing together and then retreating. And then coming together and smashing together and retreating. And it's the attrition over approach fire, then normal combat, and then maybe a second round of approach fire and normal combat in the same round.
Yeah.
Doing all of that, it just forces you apart so that you can come back and attack together again. It makes it very. I agree. It makes it difficult for the aggressor in whichever situation.
And in this, it's the Confederates. That I think that's why it just made it really, really difficult to really mount anything. I understand the concept.
Yeah.
The other thing that historically, the Confederate troops were a little more. They were just a little more. They were tougher, and they fought a little harder. Their morale value showed that.
Yes.
One of my units, I think, was. I guess I had.
They might take more hits,
right?
Because
but they can save and not be reduced.
Take losses. Just taking the demoralized.
So that was interesting. I'm not so sure. I don't know. I think in the end, I took so many losses no matter what, because it's just the way it is. I understand that. I would love to play the full campaign game of this, and that may be something I do by myself solo, because it's very long, 31 turns.
It's a lot of dice rolling.
Yeah.
But just because you just have a lot of units.
Yeah.
And each one's rolling 4 or 5 dice on average. It's just a lot.
So it can turn into... We played, in essence, 3 hours of the 3-day campaign.
Yeah.
3 hours. And it took us 4 to 4.5 hours to play.
Which, learned the game.
Yeah. And that's normal for us.
It's one of those games where it takes as long as it took in history.
Right. But overall, I really liked a lot of concepts. So we'll show you the map. Alexander will take you through some of the elements, and then we'll come back for a few final thoughts.
So here's a look at the map, and this is what we talked about. I think it's a great looking map. It's kind of somewhat monochrome, but you've got all these kind of light greens and tans, kind of I don't know. It's just a cool color. But I think it looks great. It's very clean, and it looks like there's a lot of stuff on here, but really the numbers are large, the terrain is obvious what it is, and most of the time I didn't have a problem with it. There are a couple of times when you get a lot of clustered units where it's kind of tough of like, oh, is this up the hill or down the hill? A little bit like that, because some of the battle lines get clustered, but honestly, it's a great looking map. Had a real fun playing on it with all the pieces, so... Let's take a look at just kind of some of the units and how this all looks. And what you see, all these blue Union units over here on the north, and you got the CSA down here. There's a whole bunch of different kind of counters and markers. So to start with, we'll just get a couple of these out of here. Alright. So you have some, let's get you these ones. These are some Union pieces, and they have some numbers on them. Alright. Here you have this 5 is its strength point value, and then its morale value, in this case -1, not great, and then a movement value of 9. This one has a 3 and a +1, and then a 9. So 9 movements, pretty standard amongst infantry. I think the artillery, most of the artillery pieces have like an 8. They're just not quite as mobile, and the cavalry have a bit more. But the strength points in this game refer to how many dice you roll. So that guy with a 5 strength value, he's going to roll 5 dice. He's going to roll those dice at a -1 though. The morale modifier is not only a modifier for the morale check, but also for combat checks too. This guy's going to roll 3 dice at a +1. Now, how you determine what you're doing, just for kind of an instance here, this guy who's got a 3 dice at +1, let's say he attacks this guy here. This terrain is open, and there's a terrain effects key, and that's printed on the side of the map, and that tells you your to hit number. This guy's in the open, so you need a 5 or less on a D10 to hit that guy. Well, this guy's going to roll 3 dice, needing a 5 or less +1, so a 6 or less, because of the morale modifier, and he's out in the open. Literally, you roll those dice. I rolled a 6, a 5, and a 5. Couldn't be hot or any rolling. He's going to take 3 hits. You just kind of put those on him, and you'll resolve those in a second. This guy is going to fire back, because both sides fire into combat. He's going to roll 6 dice at +1 at this guy who's out in the open. Well, that's not good. So he's rolling 6 dice, chuck them all, and he's got 1 hit, 2 hit, 3 hit. This is a 10, this is a 1, this is a 3. Fantastic. I rolled 5 hits. I just rolled 5 hits, Grant. Can you believe that?
Yes.
Okay. And so basically what happens is you then, this happens simultaneously, then you resolve these. So you do a morale check, and the morale check also uses these 10-siders, but this time you're trying to roll high. So he's got to roll a 6 or higher +1, so really a 5 or higher. And he's going to roll 3 dice, because he's got to do it for 3 hits that he took. So this is a success, this is a failure, and so is this, because these are both lower than 5 in this instance. You have to roll a 6 or less, or a 6 or more, but this is a 5 or more, because he has that +1. Well, these are 4s, so those are no good. What happens is, you consult the chart here, and this chart tells you what happens. We're in combat. He failed 2 checks. The first one, he takes a loss. The others are demoralizations, and he has to retreat. The check he passed, he's demoralized. There's not really a lot of good outcomes in combat here. So what happens is, he takes a loss, and a loss is signified by these green strength point tokens. There's a bunch of them in the game here. So he's got 6 strength points right now. What we're going to do is we're going to change that to 5 strength points. That's right here. So that's what he's got now. Let's get that focused. He's got 5 strength points. And you just put that underneath him. So that was one of his 2 hits, right? The other 2 were demoralizations. So he takes one of these yellow tokens, which is 2 demoralized. Let's get that in focus. There we go, 2 of those. And that goes underneath him as well. What that signifies is that this guy, who used to be rolling 6 dice at +1, he now has 5 strength points, so he's going to roll 5 dice, but 2 of those 5 are actually demoralized, so they don't attack and don't do anything. So he's only got 3 strength points that he can effectively use. And he had to retreat, so he's going to move back 2 spaces. 1, 2. He's just going to go back up the hill. So Didn't look good for Law there, but we're still going to make this guy's checks. He's going to take 5 hits. He only has 3 strength points, so this could be very ugly. What happens is he's going to roll all these. Again, he's +1 to his morale. So we have a 9, a 9, a 4, a 2, and a 5. That's very bad. So he's going to take 3 failures and 2 successes. So the 3 failures, one of those, the first one, like we saw on that chart, is always a loss. So he's going to take 2 strength points underneath him. So he's now only at 2 instead of a 3. But the other 4 are all demoralized. And what happens is you get the 4 demoralized counter, and then you basically retreat the man. He's got a clear path of retreat, so he retreats. But because he has more demoralized markers than he does strength points, like he's only at 2, basically both of these 2 troops are demoralized, and at that point he immediately shatters. And you basically take him and you put him in the shattered box off the board. He's effectively eliminated. Now, during the day turns, of which there's 11, you're going to get guys shattered, they're going to go off the board. During the nighttime turn, you might be able to rally them and get them back for the next day's fighting. There's 2 opportunities for that to happen. On July the 1st, then that night, July the 2nd, that night, and then July 3rd, the game ends halfway through the day. So that's a pretty bad outcome for the Union player there. They just basically were completely taken off the board. Now, they weren't eliminated, and that's important for the sake of victory points. So that unit here, he's got 2 strength points that were shattered. That's, I believe that's like 4 victory points for the CSA. If he'd have had both of these units killed and were completely eliminated, it ends up being something ridiculous like 12. It's just, it gets kind of crazy in the numbers. That's kind of very, very standard combat. But what happens is, you know, when you move in, when this guy first moves into this space, he gets one of these, and you see these here. This is kind of this approach fire marker, and you put it on the unit that moved. And the little blue arrows denote I moved in this direction, and this guy is firing on me. So before we even did all that combat, there's effectively a defensive fire from this guy. It's not very good, but it is an opportunity to pepper this person and to break this attack before it even starts. And what you would do is you would roll whatever dice you've got. Let's say this guy has a 5 and underneath a 2, so he only has 3 effective firing units. So he's going to roll 3 dice. This guy's out in the open, so normally it's a 5 target to hit. Because they're moving, it's -3. So he needs a 2 to hit, +1 for his morale. He needs a 3 to hit on 3 dice. So that's not as good. Well, of course I rolled 2 hits. Of course I did. So he's going to take 2 hits before this guy can even get into combat. And he doesn't get to attack back. So I resolve my 2 hits. Let's say, what do I have? These are 2 successes. So I'm demoralized twice, which is a good thing, so to speak. So I put those demoralized markers underneath him. And then we would proceed to combat. Why those 2 demoralized markers are a good thing is because if I had failed one of these checks and had to take a loss point, as soon as you take that loss point, you have to retreat 1-2 spaces, and then you basically, you're done. You don't get to do your main normal combat. You can't attack this guy anymore. So where this becomes important is you kind of see over here, you've got these huge battle lines. You want to be able to move multiple formations into contact with each other so that if one guy gets backed off, it's not too bad. You've still got a bunch of guys to attack with. Because what happens is, and we'll kind of show you here, this guy, Brewster, he's got 6 dice to attack with. Because he has 2 adjacent guys in his zone of control that he could attack, he has to. So he's got 6 to attack with. He has to split them and split them evenly. So I've got 3 on him and 3 on him. Which is okay, that's not bad attacks, but you saw how potent 6 dice on 1 unit was. So this game is really about moving and positioning dice so that now this guy who's got 5 dice can't just unload them all on him, whilst he also is going to take 3 dice from him and 3 here. This guy's going to take 8 dice from these 2 guys. Well, if I move this, if I move Law up here, well now this 5, he's got 5 strength points. He's got to split them here, and this guy's got to split them here. So this guy's going to take at most 6. It's much less. And again, you bring another guy in, well, he's got to split them 3 ways. That's 3 pretty puny attacks. And now I've got 3 units. This guy can fully unload on him. He's going to split 1 here, and he's going to split his dice with these 2 guys. And that's where the combat can start to take a little bit of time, just because you've got these big lines. You've got to figure out this engagement. You've got to do all the attacks and resolve them, and then move on to the next ones. Sometimes it can be a little bit crunchy with all the dice rolling and the morale checks and all that stuff. So that's why this game does take a while. Because the movement and the chip pull, that's easy. Move in, just move on how you normally would. Just spend movement points, move through terrain. But the combat, it's attritional in nature. You see that with the stacks and the losses, and how this 6 unit was really powerful a second ago, got into a combat, and now he's half as good as he ever was. You know, it happens, and it happens quickly if you're fighting in kind of disadvantageous situations. So that's where round top's really important. It's a forest on top of an escarpment. Good luck. It takes you basically a whole move, a whole turn just to even get in there. Once you're up there, you can pea shoot everyone around you, no big deal. But the terrain, moving into rough terrain, keeping in the forests as much as possible defensively is very, very important. Assaulting into forests and woods, it's very, very bloody. So you've got to pick your battles, try and break lines elsewhere so that you can surround terrain, things like that. It's hard to do, but that's kind of what you got to try and look at from kind of a grand strategic kind of an aspect of this game. So that's kind of a little look at combat and what that looks like. It's got a good structure to it. What we'll do is we'll kind of wrap up with a few final thoughts here.
So that was a look at the map. So Alexander, what's your verdict on this game after our play?
I had a fun time with this. It was a very interesting experience, and a great. I don't know. I learned a lot from these. I don't know much about the American Civil War, honestly. Sure. The stuff that I do know is from games,
right?
Like straight up.
Yeah.
The only other Gettysburg game that I've played is the one from C3I 32, which was designed by Mark Herman, which is a little half-hour game. So you get the grand strategy from that.
Right.
So I knew kind of how that had looked. Although this was very different.
Oh yeah, they're different games. So that's made to play in 30 minutes.
This was quite a new experience. I know there's a lot of Gettysburg games out there, and a lot of people are like, "Yay, another one!" But I had a great time with this. I think it modeled things like attrition very interestingly and did it well. And it forced you to do to make some like pretty tough choices, which I like in a game. And I like a game that I can play solitaire. And this is, frankly, perfect for solitaire play. Just playing both sides, pulling the activation chits, doing the best you can. I think this gets a good thumbs up for me, and I'd be interested to play Pea Ridge and see more from this as well. It is a long one, though, so that's my only thing where I'm like, okay, I got to block out some time for this. This isn't one you can set up and put away like some of the other solo games.
I mean, I would say if we're going to play all 31 turns in a grand campaign game, this is going to take us 2 days. Would be my guess. To do it and do it right. And
if
play
you were
it all
to play
the way.
all the turns, probably halfway through the game, it would be like, I'm conceding.
Well, we almost made it to the very end. I think we got within 2 chit pulls because it was impossible with zones of control and the rules. It was impossible for me to take the final, and that was a funny thing, take the final objective so that I could force a draw.
So that you could not lose.
Right. Not win, but, and that's the historical result. And it was fun to play this with you because I know a little bit about Gettysburg, and I've watched lots of documentaries. I've watched, obviously, the Gettysburg movie, read some Civil War, and it was fun to relate some of those stories
to you. I love learning about because there's a lot of stories.
Yeah,
because frankly, this wasn't all that long ago, and we have very good documentation about it.
Right.
Whereas some of the stuff before this, it's kind of like patchy here and there. We don't know as much.
The victors made it up as they went along. This one, I think there's a lot of historical journals and reports about it, and it's pretty accurate. But so I also agree with you. I think this is a very interesting game. I really liked that the terrain was a major character in the game.
Yes.
And it sounds stupid to say that because we've played many war games where terrain is a big factor.
But this one, it's like,
yeah, it
makes you make decisions.
Yeah, it makes you make decisions. It makes you change your strategy, and it makes you think before you do things. Go ahead.
The rule book,
yeah,
is very good.
Yeah, and it's not very long either.
It's actually quite easy to learn.
Yeah.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
Just because a lot of these games are like, oh, it's a lot of stuff.
And
it's actually pretty simple.
Really, to be honest, I think the rules are pretty straightforward.
And it says excellent play aids.
Yes, it does.
It's got a bunch of
everything's on there.
Which I like a 10 out of 10 on the play aids on this game.
Yeah.
So I sat down to learn the rules, and I was like, this is going to take us a while. And I was like, shoot.
15, 20 minutes we had it.
You pull a chip, move your guys.
Yeah, it's not hard.
Pull a chip, move your guys. Pull a chip, move your guys. When it comes to combat, you're like, okay, you do this step, this step, this step, this step, this step. And then the combat resolution takes a while.
Yes.
But that's just because there's a lot to do.
Well, because there can be up to 1, 2, 3. I mean, there can be up to 6 to 8 different roles for each major conflict. It just depends. I mean, the approach fire, bombardment.
Yeah, you do
there's just a lot.
Approach fire,
there's a lot.
Attack and defense.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's
if
a lot.
If you don't retreat, we're going to
dice
attack again. It's just 6 to 8 times, I think, for any good combat. But I enjoyed that the terrain was a major character in the game. It
cool.
really changed. I also like that. I think there's some skill and ability in maneuvering in this game.
Yeah.
And it's not just about running up and fighting everywhere you can. You've got to put pressure on certain areas. You've got to, because in the end, the Confederates are trying to get 4 of 7.
Well, that was just in one little scenario.
Well, yeah, this was a scenario. Yeah, so that needs to be made very clear.
There's a bunch of them,
yeah.
which is cool. You can play for just 3 or 4 hours, or you can play the whole campaign and everything in between. They do a really good job of that.
Yep.
You can play just Pickett's Charge.
Yep. Yeah, which we talked about playing that one, but we wanted to play this one. But yeah, I liked that. I really felt like I had an opportunity to win down to the very end. Until about halfway through that last turn, it was like, okay, I'm done. There's nothing I can do. And so I thought that actually was good. We talk a lot about these games that the historical outcome is modeled perfectly, and you know which side is supposed to lose. And, there's not a lot of, but I felt like I had an opportunity at the very end.
You roll a lot of dice in this. And I'm a proponent of you either roll no dice or you roll an absolute ton of them.
Right.
This is where you roll absolute ton. And so that way you get a huge spread. So in theory, it kind of goes
dice
back.
Rolls went for you.
It rolls back to the mean generally.
Yeah, not tonight.
No.
The mean was on your
early game. I was sweating, and then the rest of it, I was like,
yeah. It got kind of funny at the end. I actually kind of rolled my 5 dice one time, and I was like, yep, 7, 8, 9, a 10.
Not what you want.
Yeah, it was bad, but this game I think will definitely be in my top 10 for 2018. I don't think
put those together. Huh?
I know. I don't think it's going to be as high as I had thought it was going to be. But I still liked it.
I had a good time with this.
So I don't want anyone to think that I didn't like it. I would like to explore this more and play it some solo and get a better feel for it. But yeah, that's Battle Hymn, Volume 1, Gettysburg and Pea Ridge from Compass Games. New in 2018. Definitely an interesting game. I think we both enjoyed it. And we would recommend it. I love the map. I would love
it's so good.
to have that hanging up. It's just really well done. So thanks for watching. We appreciate all of your support. And I've been Grant for the Player's Aid.
And I've been Alexander.